go back and take control of a different screen. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's begin by talking about a case for support. I really hate this idea of support. I think this idea of support is very frustrating, because to me, I feel like we're really asking people, there should be no doubt that we are asking people to join a crusade, to join a jihad, to join a holy war with us on this fight. And so we're not asking for people to support. We're asking them to make a big investment in our organization. And so I don't want to think of ourselves as a sales force for an organization. I want to be an investment advisor on a very important cause. So we should think about this as we go through our work, and make sure that we have a good understanding of what our role really is. Because I think even though sometimes our work is very tactical, I think it's very helpful to see ourselves as being able to be part of something very important, very strategic. So I think people tend to think of fundraisers tactically. We need to see ourselves very strategically. So I'm going to share a couple of slides, and I thought it's very interesting to me to start with some headlines to look at the world that we're in right now. An incredible new technology connects the entire world, and there's greater access to information than at any time in human history ever before. There's the largest gap between the haves and the have-nots that we've ever seen in human history. There's a big cynicism, a big distrust about institutions. There's a big new concepts in philanthropy are beginning to emerge. The governments have completely lost touch with the needs of the people. There's a big nationalist backlash against the new global reality. And even terrorists master the communication tools and export global revolution, right? I mean, these feel familiar headlines to you, yes? Well, what if I told you that these were all headlines from 1848? And the very surprising thing, and by the way, is this going to be taped so that people can review it? Because I'm happy to give these slides to all of our colleagues as well, so that you don't have to take notes. So I'll make sure everybody gets copies of these slides. You know, the big invention in 1848 was the telegraph machine. It was a revolution. It was crazy. Before the telegraph machine, news would only travel as fast as a horse and a train and a ship could take it. And the news was always controlled by the power structure. And then suddenly the telegraph was announced, was what became used, and anybody anywhere in the world could figure out what was going on the same day. Imagine I could live in the United States. It would take me 2 months to understand something that happened in Italy. Now I could learn about it the same day. It was crazy. And what happened was this period, 1848, was called the People's Spring. We think of the Arab Spring, it was named after this time. And the People's Spring, though, is referred to by historians in a very negative way. It was a turning point in history where history failed to turn. It was a moment of great possibility, of great revolutions breaking out everywhere. Irish people could see that people in Sri Lanka were having a revolution, and it inspired them. The French could see revolution, it inspired them. And so amazing potential happened. There was a great taste of human rights and social justice. The middle class was created in this time frame. The middle class was created as a buffer between the lower classes and the upper classes. And what happened was the power structure had control of the communications, and they used it against the people. So there was another century of colonialism. There were 50 million people that died in 2 world wars. There was active anti-Semitism. The poor are still poor, even poorer. The powerful are still powerful, and might is still a substitute for right. So the people saw for a moment, they had the chance to get in charge of their own destiny, their own communication. But the power structure had control. They began to turn the people against one another. That's how the middle class became the problem, or became the new thing. And guess what happened? Suddenly the lower class wasn't trying to fight the upper class. They were just trying to aspire to the middle class. So the whole system was designed not to solve any problems, but to just keep the problems calmed down enough so there's no big challenges. That's what happened when we had this revolutionary new technology. Well, I think we're at a turning point in history right now. And I don't care if you're working in Peru, or if you're working on animal welfare, or if you're working on against the mafia, or any of these other things that I've seen that you are all working on. We are at a turning point in human history. Everything is, if we're not careful, it is going backwards a generation if we're not careful. Donald Trump, Modi in India, Duterte in the Philippines, Bolsonaro in Brazil. Some of the biggest democracies in the world are using democracy to vote in fascism. We see this everywhere. So the only question to me that matters is, what are we prepared to do to play our role in making sure that history turns in the right direction? Because this is a very consequential time. So I have to tell you that I have worked with nonprofits for almost 30 years, and I am very skeptical. I'm very suspicious of nonprofits. And here's why. I think if the world lost 50% of the nonprofits out there, you wouldn't even know it happened. Do you know how many nonprofits exist in the United States? Anybody want to venture a guess? How many nonprofits, not advocacy organizations, just organizations to help? Could somebody give me a number that you think exists? I'm going to call on somebody. Well, I'll tell you what the number is. There are more than 1.8 million nonprofits in the United States. That's crazy. What if there was 1.8 million clothes companies or car companies or anything else? It'd be crazy. And so the challenge that we have, I think, in our work is we have become too precious and too caught up in our own importance. And sometimes we don't think, are we good enough? Are we the best answer? Because if you're not the best answer for animal rights, then leave. If you're not the best answer to fight the mafia, then leave. If you're not the best answer to listen to the people and build volunteer communities, leave. Because these issues are too important for us to have trouble with our resources. So the first thing I always ask every nonprofit is very simple. Is the problem that that there's too much power, or is the problem that there's too little leadership in your nonprofit? Is the problem that you are morally superior, or Are you the best answer? There's many organizations that are for profit that do a better job than nonprofits. Do you adapt to public opinion or do you shape public opinion? I can't tell you how many communications experts I see where you say, well, but if you look at the market research says you have to say it this way. And my answer is, the market research is bullshit. Your job is not to adapt to what the market research is. Your job is to change public opinion. And you have to. Are you stewards of other people's money, meaning you're conservative and you show all your data and you show all your information? Or are you innovators and risk takers? There's very little innovation that's done in nonprofits anymore. They all get very satisfied with incremental health, incremental progress, incremental success at a time when we have tools that, you know, you look at this crazy device right here, right? Gandhi was a pacifist, but Gandhi would have killed somebody to get his hands on one of these smartphones. And the biggest thing that we've done with a smartphone is what? The ice bucket challenge. This is a chance to connect people all around Italy, all around a cause, all around the world. And none of us have done a good job of doing it. Do we fight enemies or do we cultivate believers? How do we find us and how do we find them? So the first thing that I would say to anybody in the nonprofit field is, if your first idea is to borrow somebody's agency, borrow the agency of animals, for example, and then your first action is to make compromises on behalf of the animals, well, then you shouldn't be in your work. Your job is to not make compromises. When you adopt the voice of the voiceless, you have a moral obligation to be important. You have a moral obligation to make the most contribution that you can. So the real question is, do you have a right to exist? I'm not convinced. And I don't care. All I care about is, are we going to end hunger or not? Are we going to stop the mafia or not? Are we going to fight fascism or not? I don't care how we do it. I care that we do it. And that's the most important thing. So I'm going to put forth 5 questions, 5 very important questions to me that I think every nonprofit must have an answer to. Okay? Question number 1 is, what is your issue and why is it worth the most sacred things that I have? Because you're asking me for some very important things. You're asking for my money, or you're asking for my time, or you're asking for my commitment, my sacred commitment of my heart and my mind. Those are the most sacred things I have. My Catholic priest asks me for those every week, right? I want your money, I want your time, and I want your heart and your soul. Well, that's what you're asking. So the challenge is, do you know how to describe your issue? And do you know how to help people see that it's worth their most sacred time, money, and passion? And I'm not talking about everybody. I'm just talking about the people who are likely to join your cause. The next one, what is your theory of change? And what are the values and beliefs that it's based upon? Some people's theory of change is, if you can educate women and provide them with tools, there will be a huge effect to that. There's a theory of change. Another theory of change is, I'm going to be at the bottom of the waterfall and help everybody that falls down the cliff. Another theory of change is, I'm going to go way upstream of the waterfall and help people before they fall down the cliff. These are all theories of change. The question is, what is yours, and what is the values and beliefs that it's based upon? Here's the third question. Why should I place my faith in you? I just said, I am friends. There's a man named Dennis Hayes. And Dennis Hayes was one of the founders of Earth Day in the 1970s. And in 1970s, this was an amazing social movement, an amazing global movement. They had telephones. They didn't have global communication. They didn't have smartphones. They didn't have anything, but it's a massive movement around the world to save the environment, okay? Now, if you look at my state, I live in Washington State, up in the northwest of the United States. There are 7 million people in Washington State. There are 3 million environmental nonprofits just focused on Washington State. 3,000. So you have 7 million people, 3,000 nonprofits just on the environment in Washington State. And nothing's changing because each small little nonprofit has one little small piece of the activity. And each of them has a director, and each of them has a fundraiser, and each of them has a board, and each of them has a cause. And we have divided the pie so small that nothing's really changing, except in one small community or one river or something like that. That's our fault. There should never be 3,000 nonprofits in Washington State dealing with the environment. I would have a hard time wondering why we had 300, but we do. What if I place my faith in you, if I say I'm going to make my bet on you, what are you going to do with my sacred time and money and passion? And then finally, how will you keep me involved? I'm not your cash machine or your bank. I want to feel like you see me as part of this cause, as part of this work. Does that make sense? I'm going to stop the share for a minute and look at everybody's faces and make sure that we are not sleeping. Any thoughts or questions about what I've said so far? Any challenge?
What if I answer no? It doesn't make sense that I exist.
Then get a different business. Meaning we
No,
need more people.
Yeah.
Do it. Here's the answer to your question, Julia. Do exactly what you're asking an investor or a donor to do. Find the organization that truly is making the difference in the cause that you agree with and join them, right? You want me as an investor to give you, 10,000 euros. Why? If you won't commit, I'm not going to commit. So find the organization that's really going to solve the problem and put your backing behind that organization. And I think one of the boldest things an organization should do, I was on the board of directors of Landmine Survivors Network. And you know what we decided? The issue is getting under control. It really should be solved in countries. And so we're going to cease to exist. We're going to stop to exist. We're going to push all our resources to various country organizations who can do it better than us, and we'll stop. More money, more resources are actually going to landmines because we made that decision. Yeah? Other thoughts or questions? Daniela.
You said that you shouldn't have so many organizations, but the fact is that very often people are interested only in the problems that it's the NIMBY effect, only the ones that are near where they live, and they tend not to consider problems that are a few miles or a few kilometers away. So how is it possible to ask them to take part in something which doesn't concern them directly?
It's not. The simple answer is it's very hard. So we did some work for UNICEF, and here's what we found. We found there was a sphere of donors. Some, maybe 15%, I'm making these numbers up, but maybe 15% are my backyard only. If it doesn't affect my community or my issue, I don't care. Okay, so great. If you're a small community organization, use them. Another group of people, maybe 20%, are religious donors, meaning they give through their church. Mormons give through their church. Many Catholics give through their church. They give their money to the church and they say, you control how the money is spent. Some are trigger givers, meaning, oh my God, this poor puppy. And then next month, oh my God, those poor children. And then the next month, oh my God, the earthquake in Nepal. They're not reliable donors, right? You still have to talk to them when you have crisis, but they're not reliable. But then there's some others. One that says, I give because of my faith, but not through my church, meaning I give to human rights because my faith says that human rights are important to me. So I have a deep motivation. If you look at most of the civil rights work in the United States, our big civil rights movement was by the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. It was church people. They did the work. And then there's another group, which is compassionate global givers, meaning I care about the cause, I care about the issue, and I want to make a difference wherever I can in animal welfare or wherever I can in social justice. So what we have to do is see that there's a sophisticated differences in different kinds of people and only serve the ones that are going to be likely to be interested in our cause. Only communicate with them. Sometimes the essence of making a position is knowing who you're willing to sacrifice. Your job isn't to make everybody happy a little bit. Your job is to find people who are willing to be crazy about your cause and make them ecstatic, make them very happy all the time. That's the challenge of this work, I think. Any other thoughts? So I'll go a little bit further.
Yes, I'm thinking about organizational sustainability in general. I'm thinking about how, for example, maximize impact if by a co-designing project. But for example, in this case, what about fundraising if we are not able to cooperate to a common goal? Just some mixed reflection.
It is a very huge problem, Giada, is that we find all these organizations that are not willing to cooperate. So we have two organizations trying to end hunger, but they won't work together when it comes to fundraising to end hunger. And so we have to figure out ways to find different models, right? We can look at it and say, okay, I'm not going to fund an organization, one or two, but I am going to fund a campaign that both of these organizations are part of, right? So you find some middle ground in that. But this is crazy. You know, when in technology, so I am an electrical engineer from 1980s, right? When technology companies want to get something done, they collaborate all the time. I always call it cooperation. Half cooperation, half competition. That's how it works. Doesn't work very well in the NGO world.
No.
Other comments before I go? Okay, let's keep talking some more then. Let's see, what am I doing here? Okay, can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I say If you can answer these questions right, then you don't have a right to exist, you have an obligation to exist. If you know the answer to these questions, if you know what you stand for, then suddenly you don't have to justify your existence. It's very important that you exist. That's what we're trying to get. Yeah? So I want to talk about these first three questions, because I think what happens to a lot of people with a case for support is they forget to answer these first three questions and they start at question number 4. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do with your money. And it's like, well, okay, but I don't know why I would want to put my faith in you anyway. I don't know why what your theory of change is. I don't know who you really are, or what you're going to be to the cause. And I think that's the problem, is people forget that their number one job is to answer those questions first. So I like to think about this idea of a document called a manifesto. The question for all of us is, what is your manifesto? What is your Declaration of Independence? What is your Magna Carta? What is the thing that says, this is why we exist? And it's very good to think very hard about what the answer to what that document will do. Because the ideas in that document will not just help you raise more money, they'll help you recruit more talent. They'll help you increase the size of your social movements, etc. And if you get your manifesto right, then your vision and mission and operating principles are clear, your strategy is clear, your case for support is easy, and even your communications plans are easy, if you get the manifesto right. I always explain the example of, I grew up in the deserts of Arabia. And so I always think about Bedouins that are walking through the desert. And it's a very interesting thing. Us Westerners, when we walk through the desert, we use a compass and we think that we're heading in a direction. But what we don't realize is there are many forces that are acting against us all the time. And one example is each person has a stronger leg than the other. So there are many times in history where people will walk for 3 days and die 400 meters from where they started because they didn't realize they were walking in a big circle because one leg was stronger than the other. And this is a very good analogy to me, because what a Bedouin does, so subconsciously, each time a Westerner's walking in the desert, they think they're taking a good step, and they don't realize until you add them up that they've actually gone astray. In the Bedouin tradition, they pick a rock on the horizon and they walk towards that. And the exact opposite happens. You don't even realize it, but you're always subconsciously correcting in the direction of the rock. It doesn't matter if there's rivers or mountains or anything else, you'll constantly move towards the rock. This manifesto is your rock on the horizon. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of one of these manifestos for Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation. I'm going to ask a very embarrassing question for those of us that are a little bit older. But have you guys in Italy seen the TV show Starsky and Hutch?
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's so embarrassing each time that I ask that question, because everybody in the world knows Starsky and Hutch. Well, guess what? Starsky, his wife, is Elizabeth Glaser. So Jan Michael Glaser, his wife is Elizabeth Glaser. She got AIDS from a blood transfusion. And she didn't know it, but she gave it to her children. And one of her children is still alive, but she's dead, and so is her first child. So she created the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation. And the question is, now people look at AIDS sort of like diabetes. It's a problem, but you just live with it and you manage it. But every day, 1,000 children in Africa get AIDS because their mother doesn't know. Their mother doesn't have access to knowledge, or they don't have access to the right drug. So still today, 1,000 people are, 1,000 children are getting HIV/AIDS. That's crazy. But how do I get an American, a white guy like me, to care about that cause? I'm caring about African children, 10,000 kilometers away from me. What is the issue? So we said, how will we make this connect to everybody? And my creative director said something very powerful. He said, dude, everybody has a belly button. Do you know what a belly button is? Yeah. And he said, everybody has a mother. Everybody came from an umbilical cord. Everybody knows that it is taboo that a mother gives their children death simply because she doesn't have the right education. So we said, okay, nature's most sacred commitment is the mother's commitment to her child. And so what we said is, if a mother gives her child HIV/AIDS, what can she do? She can hold her child lovingly the way only a mother can. She can look into her son's eyes and pray that things will be okay. She can grieve about her daughter's pain and suffering. She can lament unlived moments and unrealized dreams, and she can fight. She can use every resource in her reach to ensure her child will live. She can use every tool at her disposal to ensure her child will be treated with dignity and love. She can use every ounce of courage to speak truth to authority and demand that the powerful and the influential understand that every mother has the right to know how to protect her child, and every child has a right to thrive. And so what we said is, every mother in Africa is Elizabeth Glazier. And society has a sacred obligation to every mother to ensure she has the knowledge and tools that she needs so she does not unknowingly transmit death and suffering to her children. So it's not about the statistics of HIV/AIDS in sub-Saharan Africa. It's not about, is 1,000 kids really that bad of a problem, et cetera, et cetera. What it says is, this is unacceptable to human beings. We used a similar idea with UNICEF. We used a similar idea and we said, let's ask everybody in society. UNICEF had many rules. You must show children. You must show statistics. You must show programs. You must show all these different rules, right? And we said, but let me ask you this question. If you asked everybody in civilized society, what is an acceptable number of children to die every day of preventable causes like diarrhea? No civilized human being would say anything except 0. 0 children should die of these causes. And so we created a campaign, Believe in Zero. There were no children in the campaign, no statistics, no nothing. It was, we are going to do whatever it takes to save a child. That was our campaign. So in this, I'm going to give you some tools that you can work with later, but these questions you should think about and see if you could write your manifesto, okay? Now, I'm not going to ask you to do that right now because I'm going to move to a case for support, but what I also want to give you to my communication colleagues, around is I also want to show you some simple tools to build a communication plan. So I'm not going to talk about it much, but I'm going to give this to you in your slide presentation so you can follow it. So if you know your manifesto and you know that you can get your vision and operating principles through that, and you know you can get your strategy, you can also develop your communications. So if you look at it, I'm going to give you some tools here on how do you manage people through a relationship where they don't know anything about you all the way to they're very committed to your cause, right? You try to move people through this relationship. And again, I'll give you all these slides so you can look at them later. What is their state of mind? What is the message you can give them? what is the desired response that you can hope for, and what are the tools that you can use to share this, to share the information. So our job is to make sure that we know what the steps of the relationship are like. We know what their state of mind is, what their message is, what our message is, what's their desired response, and we just move them through this system with various tools. So then you can decide which communication tools you most want to use to get your messaging across. So here's an example for Elizabeth Glazier Pediatric AIDS Foundation. I'm unaware. Okay, I'm still pessimistic, but I'm open-minded. Here's my first donation. Here's I'm a reliable source of funds. And over here, I'm a committed partner, right? So what is my opinion? What is the story I can tell? What is the desired action? When you start way out here at unaware, it's very crazy to think that the first response you're going to get is a donation. Sometimes all you need is somebody to spend some time on a website or spend some time onto a brochure. So you can see here, I certainly care about the plight of mothers and children in the world, but AIDS, especially AIDS in Africa, is pretty complicated. I'm not sure there's anything anybody can really do about it. Well, actually, that's not true. We represent a mother that was crazy that fought this cause. Okay? And so all we want you to do is spend 5 minutes on our website. That's all we're asking you to do right now, to look at what we're trying to tell you. Now somebody says, okay, I think that this is not okay with me, so I'm interested in hearing what else you have to say. Great, please look at this argument, a case for support. Great, I've made my first donation. So you can literally move people through this process. And here's an example for the Nature Conservancy. And then what you can look at here is great. So in each of these different categories, this is one for a financial organization. I can look at it and say, great, here's the tools I'll use at stage 1. Here's the tools I'll use at stage 2. Here's the tools I'll use at stage 3. Here's the tools I'll use at stage 4. So you begin to take all your messages and you spread them out smartly across the different stages people are in a relationship. I'm happy to talk individually more with you about these things with no free. I just wanted you to get an idea that there's a way to turn all these ideas into actual communication systems. Make sense? So then you can spend some time looking at your own relationship management system and discussing what makes sense. So now I want to talk about, how do you build a case for support? What is the way you tell your story that's very effective? Now, we had some really outstanding examples of in last week's session, if those of you attended, they were talking about your mission and your idea and your vision and all these things. Well, the thing to me is, those things all the way in your manifesto, they should influence everything you say, everything you do. That rock on the horizon should be the idea that permeates everything you say. And so here's something I want to have you keep in mind. Don't worry so much about what is the right story. Worry about what is the moral to the story. Do you know what I mean by moral? So we all have lessons, right? Like the boy who cried wolf. There's a moral to that story. That's what we're trying to communicate about all the time, is the moral. So let's talk about a case for support. First, before we do, I'm going to jump back and make sure that I have any questions or anything else that I can answer before I dive into the case for support. Any thoughts, any challenges? Good? Okay, let's go now. Back to share. So this is a case for support for an organization called Project Hope. Project Hope works to train healthcare workers all around the world to help them be more effective. And they used to be, after World War II, a lieutenant in the American Navy saw incredible poverty at all these small Pacific islands, bad health, bad poverty, people struggling. So he went to the President of the United States and he asked if he could buy a hospital ship. So he bought a hospital ship for $200 US. He bought it, he outfitted it, and he would take doctors and nurses all around the world, and they would stay in these ports and they would help train doctors and nurses throughout various communities. In a way, it was like social media before there was social media. They used a ship. So, but the key to Project Hope, they don't have a ship anymore. They don't have many interesting, they have many programs, but it's very different now. And so the question is, well, why do I care about Project Hope anymore? So we started with the very first issue. Why do you have a right to exist? What is the issue that is so important that it's worth my time? And for us, what we said is, look, the solution to every global health challenge always hinges on one thing: a person. A doctor or a nurse, a pharmacist, a midwife, a public health educator, or a volunteer who's trained in hygiene. Every health issue, whether it impacts a small family or a huge region, depends entirely on whether the health worker on the ground has what he needs to do his job. She is the linchpin to the entire system. He is the hero of every story. If you give her what she needs, and she will turn the tide of an epidemic. She will save a child, she will teach the mother, and she will show her peers how to do the same. So their theory of change is, we go in to train healthcare workers on the ground so they can be effective. That's their theory of change. That's why they exist. Do you understand the difference between Médecins Sans Frontières' theory of change? What is their theory of change? Their theory of change is, we will take beautiful, handsome French doctors and nurses, and we will send them into every crisis. We'll fix the problems that exist, and then we'll leave. It's a different theory of change. Some people look at that and say, we need beautiful, handsome French doctors in the middle of a crisis. I'm going to give money. Other people will look at that and say, nah, I would rather we were helping build from the ground up medical infrastructure. So I'll give money to that. It's just a different choice. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's different. So this is the choice for this organization. Okay, so here's what we say. There's never been a better time to save lives everywhere. This is the moment when what we do is most important. So we've already told you what is your what is the reason we exist? What is our theory of change? Why would you invest in us? Because this is what this here says, why would you invest in us? Because decades before the digital revolution, in a time when live streaming and global connectivity were the subject of science fiction, the people of Project Hope had a vision of a global community of caregivers. And so we list out what makes us so different, what shows us why we're different, what shows people proof and evidence that we're really outstanding. And then the next question is, what do I need? Or what if I gave you my money, what would you do with it? Well, we know what local health care workers need to have the greatest impact. They need knowledge, they need tools, they need support systems, and they need to be able to get more evidence about outcomes. So this is what they need to be successful. This is what we do differently. And so what we want is to have you help us transform global health one health worker at a time. With your help, we can do this. With your help, we can do this. With your help, we can do this. Here are our strategic imperatives. Here are the things that make us, these are the big priorities so that we can live up to our manifesto. So if we know what the rock on the horizon is, these are the 7 priorities that we're going to emphasize to get to that rock. So number 1, we must go where the need is greatest. Number 2, we must scale our life-saving work to reach more people. Number 3, we want to mobilize our volunteer network. Number 4, we want to leverage our in-kind resources. Number 5, we want to be able to respond to health emergencies. Number 6, we want to innovate with new ideas. Can I do surgery around the world using technology? And then also we want to be thought leaders. We want to teach everybody that this is the best way forward. So does that make sense how I took those basic 5 questions and brought them in to a basic structure of a case for support? Any questions or thoughts? Anybody want to get in an argument with me? So all this case for support, if you know the answer, we wrote this case for support in 1 week because we knew the answer to the important questions. What is the issue and why is it so important? What is your theory of change and what values is it based on? And their theory, the issue is the only way to address true global health is to empower people. What do? We provide all the tools that somebody needs to be able to excel so that we hit one bowling pin and the other bowling pins hit themselves because we're successful. So we plant seeds of great education, knowledge, learning. We give people tools and they become successful and they teach more people and more people and more people. So Project Hope has opened hospitals around the world, in China, in India, because they have this idea. And those hospitals in China are churning out brilliant doctors and nurses all day long to work in the most rural areas of China. That's the idea. Why would I place my faith in you? Because my story goes all the way back to World War II when we bought a ship. And we bought a ship, and the idea was we're going to take that ship to the hardest to go places, and we're going to teach people how to be successful. And today we have a digital ship, and we can go to 100,000 ports every day and help educate people. Okay, what would you do with my money? I've got 7 key imperatives. Here's the critical imperatives that I am going to fund. Does it make sense?
Yes, it does. I have a question, if I can go.
Sure.
It's more of a random thought, and I don't know. I also have an idea of what the solution could be, but I don't know if it makes sense. So, if we want to, get rid of those 8 billion, 1,000 million of organization that they kind of parcelize, they like everybody's doing like their little part, they're taking care of their backyard, and isn't that the idea? Because I'm thinking about donors kind of interest in Italy, especially. They put a lot of focus on grassroots, on the small organization, on local, on stakeholders, on people that know the place where they live. And when you started with the 5 question, something came to my mind. And I'm like, so only the very big NGO can actually make a difference. So like, if we're talking about climate, maybe like Greenpeace is the only one that is worth to keep on funding. If we're talking about animal, is WWF, I don't know how you pronounce that, but but don't you kind of risk to, if I'm working in a place that is very far away from my headquarters, to miss out the theory of change, to mess it up? Because I'm assuming what a place that is very far away from where I'm based is needing. So like, I don't know how Hope for Change works. So they're going in Africa or in China, but they like, are they collaborating with the people living there and asking them like, do you really need, you know, that we come and we train your nurses and your doctor? Because I think the risk of big organization is that one. If you don't have local chapter working with people and knowing, making like a context analysis and knowing the place when you're operating, the risk is that, yeah, you know, you're like messing up your theory of change. You're assuming that they need something, but maybe they need something different.
Well, now I was going to try very hard to not get political, but now I have to get political to answer your question.
I'm sorry.
So let's go back to 1848. There was a power structure, and the power structure created a reality so that it could trickle down just enough support to keep all the problems from flaring up. Our entire system is based on capitalist trickle-down theory. When people think about help, they think there's a magnetic north. The northern countries, the Western countries, they're the ones that have all the best ideas. And the entire system that we've built over the last 70 or 80 years since the war is to trickle down, is to transfer wealth and wisdom from the West to all the brown people in the world. And I think that usually means white wealth and wisdom from the West to all the brown people, because the brown people are at the bottom of the power structure and the white people are at the top of the power structure. And so if you look at some of the largest NGOs, they simply exist to be middlemen in that transfer. We're going to take money from rich white people and we're going to export it based on what we think is important to all the brown people. Well, guess what? Everything changed. So let's take a look at micro lending. Okay, micro lending existed for a period of time and it's becoming obsolete already. Why? Because I would give a woman in India 300 euros so she could buy 4 goats. Okay, but I would charge her 24% interest on that loan. Now, but if that woman got sick and she couldn't pay back the loan, she was in trouble. If her husband stole her money, she was in trouble. Now she has this smartphone. She can create a community of other women that are farmers. She always knows what the fair market is. She can have a relationship with a bank that's 500 kilometers away. She can have insurance. She knows what the market price is for her vegetables. This can empower her and eliminate the need for the loan. So what I believe the new paradigm is this. We went from one magnetic pole, one magnetic north, Europe and the United States. And now, because of digital and everything else, there's a magnetic field around the entire earth. Brilliant ideas, crazy new ways are coming up from everywhere. And we're finding, so I'm the chairman of an organization called Resource Alliance. We started to do seminars and symposiums all through Africa and India. And guess what? We're bringing more intelligence from India to Europe than we are bringing intelligence from Europe to India. That's the shift. That's the shift, is that this whole paradigm, that's what's getting broken right now, is we don't need you to export wealth and wisdom. I can give a donation right now to an organization that's working on the ground, helping the lowest caste of India in a particular region, and I don't need UNICEF, and I don't need CARE, and I don't need MSF, and I don't need all these other organizations. I can do that. So that's the challenge. And I think what you're finding in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, all of the big NGOs are saying, you know, we really care about what the people on the ground need. It's not just us saying things. Well, they have to, because they have no choice, because now there's market forces operating on them. We could bypass them completely. And I'm going to tell you what, I don't know if those organizations are going to exist in 10 years. I do not know. I think there's a whole new rebuilding of a whole new system that's underway. And all I know is you better have an answer to those 5 questions, and it better be very powerful to the people you're trying to serve. Does that make sense? Sorry that I'm political, but it's very much what I believe.
No, makes sense. Thank you. Thank you for your answer.
Yeah. Other questions or thoughts, and I'm just going to close up with some ideas, and then I'd love to talk about your organizations. Yeah. Okay, let's see if I can do it again, not be too crazy. Okay, so I talked about these big imperatives. Now guess what I do? I take each one of these imperatives, going where the need is greatest, for example, and guess what? Going where the needs is greatest. The Seeds of Hope initiative. Here's what the need is. Here's what the solution is. Here's what the investment requires. And then here is the steps that we go through to show it. So we took everyone. So I said, here's what I stand for. Here's my theory of change. Here's why you should have faith in me. Here's what I'm going to do with your money. Now here's the detail that you need to see exactly what we're making happen. So meet the real need. The real need is in Central America, in Africa, in parts of Asia. Great. Here's where we have all this. The great majority of funding from NGOs and government agencies are utilized to scale health programs in regions of the world where progress has already been shown. And we need to go places where it's hardest, right? I was talking to the head of a hunger organization, and he said, well, we can't go into places like South Sudan because there's not enough government infrastructure and not enough civic infrastructure for us to deliver our hunger solution. And it's like, God damn it, if people are hungry because there's not enough government infrastructure. So what you're telling me is they have to become a more civilized society in order for your solution to work. You are not addressing a problem, you're a solution in search of a problem. You see what I mean? Because it's when your government is broken, when their conflict exists, that's when people are hungry. And if you exist to end hunger and you can't solve a problem then, well, then you're not very good at your job. So this is the kind of thinking that we do, going where the need is the greatest. Here's an initiative. Here's the need, here's the solution, here's the investment, here's an example of us at work. Mobilizing our volunteer network. Here's an initiative, Project Hope Volunteer Corps. Here's the need, here's the solution, here's an investment, here's an example of a small story of how amazing it was to people we serve. Here's an example of responding to health emergencies. Swift, organized, sustainable. Here's the need, here's the solution, here's the investment that's required. Okay, so this is exactly how you bring your big aspiration, your big idea, your big goals, your big promises down to very tactical examples. I've built the story all the way through from the big picture down to the small detail. Does it make sense? And again, I'll give you this, I have permission to give you this. So what I want to do is just take a few minutes if we can, stop share. We have 10 minutes or so. When you think about your organizations, does anybody want to take an idea and say, here's what I think maybe my big idea is or my theory of change is? I don't want to pick on my guy who's kissing a cow, but any thoughts come to mind, or for you, Ariana?
We can try to say something. I mean, our theory of change was announced previously, so we really want to change this system, the food production system, but we need to understand how to do it. So maybe what we are trying to be focused on is to create local communities that can act locally and try to change something in their area. So basically we are trying to build up chapters. We have already strong values that comes from the global movement. So we are a non-violent movement. It's an anti-speciesist movement. It's an intersectional movement. So we are anti-oppression in every, like we try to fight all oppression, but like the movement is based on animal rights, animal liberation, but we try to fight all oppression. So basically we try to create local chapters, and we believe in empowering activists locally so they can act locally. So that's
Simone, let me ask you a question. Why should I care about animals and animal rights?
so basically
Ariana, go ahead.
Yes, because your question deals with one of our most important missions, which is not only to change like our food production system, but an entire culture. We are trying to question the way society looks at animals. We are trying to question laws. We are trying to question languages. So our mission is based on bearing witness to animals outside like places of exploitation and suffering. So basically we go them and we go them to meet them, to tell their stories, what's hidden behind like advertisement, behind like the industry. So this is what we do. And we are trying to push people, to encourage people to take a stand alongside the animal resistance. So this is our, I think, focus.
Yeah. Simone, what do you think?
Yeah, I think she said something right, and also like why people should care about what we do. Of course, we try to bring people in front of the animals and let people see who they really are, to get them to know the animals as individuals. But we also, like as an intersectional movement, we also try to make people understand that fighting for animal liberation, it's also something that would solve many other problems, because we know nowadays that animal agriculture industry and the fishing industries are some industries that are a leading cause of the climate change. We know that working in those industries, working in a slaughterhouse, it's not a job that many people would do. It's affecting the psychology of people and brings people into something really bad. So we try
So
to
let me make an echo back to you.
Yeah.
So this is an argument that I might make, right? I would say this: if you believe that that nature and life exists on a hierarchy, and you believe in survival of the fittest, we're not a good solution for you. However, if you believe that the true positive, the way nature progresses is through symbiosis, not one killing the other and dominating, but a beautiful collaboration among nature, right? That if you believe that if we had a symbiotic understanding of the ocean, we wouldn't be raping its fisheries and destroying its thing. If we had a symbiotic understanding of nature, we would see that all these living animals, all these lives mean something more to us existentially, and they contribute to our well-being, not because of food, but they contribute to our well-being because of a functional symbiotic environment. So I'd be willing to say, I'm going to throw away, if you're Darwinian and you love meat, I'm going to not worry about you at the moment. I'm going to talk to those people who have a more symbiotic Buddhist, Hindu understanding, right? Then what is your theory of change? Your theory of change is, you know the phrase herding cats? it's very challenging to herd cats, to get all the cats to move in the same direction. We say this in the United States, it's like, oh my God, this is like trying to herd cats, trying to get all the cats moving in the same direction. And what I say is the best way to herd cats is cat food, meaning put cat food out and cats will figure it out for themselves. They'll go the right direction. So what I think with you, when you look at those little pockets, those little diverse areas, what you're basically saying is, I am allowing for examples of symbiosis to bloom. I'm showing examples where ecosystems can change because people's behavior has changed. And I'm going to support those examples. And as I do, more and more people are going to see the merits of our ideas. And they're going to see, maybe I am not seeing nature in a hierarchy where our job is to conquer nature, but I see a symbiotic relationship, and you're showing me examples of what it can mean. So do you see the difference? You're thinking programmatically. You're thinking, okay, I do these programs, and I look at it, and what I'm trying to say is, I don't give a shit. I don't care. What do you care about? Now, if you're talking about symbiotic relationships and a relationship with nature that's symbiotic rather than domineering, well, now you have my attention, because I think there's something powerful and beautiful in that, right? And now you show me I'm not going to try to destroy the system or anything else, but I am going to create pockets of excellence. I'm going to invest in innovation labs to show this model at work. And when I do, you will see the merits of it, and it'll grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. There it is. Well, okay, then why would I place my faith in you? Well, because I have this history of doing it a certain way. Okay, what would you do with my money? I want you to fund 4 very important initiatives to help us. I want you to help fund more operations in remote countries where the system hasn't already dominated everything, where in remote parts of India, for example, where you can still impact the ecosystem and show a better way, right? So these are the kinds of things when I can look at it and say, actually, I didn't think I was an animal welfare guy, but now that you think of it this way, I'm very intrigued by that. I'm willing to invest in that kind of experimentation and exploration because I think it could be something big. Now, some people are going to look at it and say, I love animals more than people. The only friends I have are animals. So of course I'll give you my money because I'm an animal lover. And other people will look at it and say, I want systems change. I know we can't get here from here to there unless we do things radically different. Great, there's different ways to tell that story. But I think your story, and again, I'm just some stupid American guy that's sitting out here in California, but I think your story is, you're using animals as an example, but to me, you're trying to build a more holistic ecosystem mindset to humankind so that we all live in cooperation and support of one another rather than destroy, which leads to more destruction, which leads to more destruction, which leads to more destruction. So I think, you just, those are the things that I'm talking about with your manifesto. So does that make sense, everybody, what I'm framing here? So it's just a slightly different look at it, and to say, I think that the most important thing you can do is always ask yourself, who gives a shit? Do you know what I mean? Are there any other questions or thoughts that I can answer for people? I mean, I just love being with you. I would love to communicate on email. You don't have to worry about me trying to land business. I do this because this is what my business, I love this work. So feel free to communicate with me on email. If you want to try a manifesto, I'd be happy to offer you my thoughts and advice. But any other questions or thoughts I can answer? Anybody else want to challenge me on one thing that I can see if I can tell the story in a slightly different way? Okay. I think
cimentarsi, basta.
I think we're at the end of our time for this brief moment, but I would like to invite you into friendship, into symbiotic relationships with each other. Please feel free to share your ideas and your thoughts. I would love to chat with you. I think I'm going to be in Italy maybe this May for the Italian Fundraising Festival, so maybe I can meet you face to face. But Valerio Melandri and his crazy group of Italians. But please do reach out. Please give me something to do rather than talk to my wife because she's sick of hearing my voice.
I'm sure she's not. Thank you very much, Bill. Grazie
My pleasure.
Grazie a tutti per aver partecipato, grazie dei vostri contributi, grazie a Simone e Arianna per aver portato il loro esempio. Grazie davvero, Bill. Thank you. That was very, very interesting and very challenging. Credo che quello che ha detto stasera Bill sia qualcosa su cui riflettere, perché mette in dubbio molte delle attività che facciamo e ci fa chiedere se vale la pena che esistiamo, no? So thank you. This was challenging. I'm gonna go to bed and think about if I have a reason to exist. Thank you, Bill. And we will probably get in contact with you and ask you again for your advice, and we will argue with you. I see you want to argue, so.
I want to argue. We can't get anywhere if there's no friction and no debate and no challenge. We're not making progress.
Molto
So
vero.
I get very excited about challenges.
Bene, bene, ce ne sono, ne abbiamo di challenges, giusto? Va bene. Bene, grazie mille. Thank you very much, Bill. Ancora grazie. E vi ricordo che ci vediamo giovedì in compagnia di Michele Messina. Grazie per essere stati qui con noi e una buona serata. Have a good evening. Thank you, Bill. Grazie a
Ciao,
tutti.
brothers and sisters. So long.
Ciao. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.